Hello, everyone. Welcome to Click Moments, where the right information at the right time is a portal from where you are to where you want to be. And I'm your host, Beth Orr. And today I'm really excited about this conversation. We have a special guest. Today here, I'm going to be having a conversation with Carol Mae Whittick, who is in London. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a bio about her. But welcome, Carol. We're so excited to be able to have this conversation today.
Thank you, Beth. I'm excited too. Looking forward to see where it goes.
Yes. So Carol Mae is a creativity and spiritual life coach. She hosts a podcast called Her, which is Higher Energetic Resonance. It's an amazing podcast. You should check it out if you haven't heard it yet. And she helps visionary women activate their inner power and boldly embody their life purpose. You can find Carol on Instagram and Facebook at CAZMICK. And I would highly recommend that you check her out. In fact, usually a lot of times when I'm doing an interview, I talk about the projects that people have going on. But we're going to talk less about the projects and more about who Carol Mae is and how she got to where she is right now. Because as you know about me, I appreciate and honor and know how challenging it is to walk your authentic life. It is something that many of us have wanted to do, and it's hard for us to figure out how to do. And so the more people that are willing to be vulnerable and share their story of their transformation and where they came from and how they got to where they are, I think it gives all of us more of the willpower and the courage to do it ourselves. So we're going to have a little bit more of an in-depth conversation with Carol Mae today. So thank you again, Carol Mae, for being here and being willing to have this conversation.
No problem. That's fine. There's part of me that always likes to kind of excavate and find out the why and the where of everything. So it's I appreciate being given this opportunity to share that part of myself. Because then it will just make sense why I do what I do, as opposed to me just coming in and it's flying the flag for all the things that I'm doing. It's just more about me, and I know that if ever I hear about somebody or I hear them on the podcast, or just find out about someone, then I go on a little dig all over the internet and listen to podcasts and see. I want to know their backstory and what brought them to where they are as well. That gives me like a deeper appreciation of their journey and their level of authenticity as well. If you can see some sort of journey and backstory and transformation, I think transformation is probably one of my it's probably a fascinating thing for me. It's always been about the before and after and what that can mean on so many different levels. Yeah.
And that's where we're going to start, right there.
Mm.
Well, let's start with, tell us a little bit about who you were whenever you were starting in your career and in your life, and where you find yourself to be right now, and what what was it that made you
Mm.
think, I've got to do something different? Like, what was the awareness that you had, that moment that you were like, I need to do something different with my life?
Yeah. Like kind of looking backwards, it's like trying to think of where was there a point that I knew that I had to do something different. I've always wanted more than my surroundings. I didn't want to be a statistic. Kind of you get put in a certain box, and for my mom got married, my dad passed when I was very early, so I was brought up in a single parent family, and there was my mother and my brother and me. So statistically the odds were not in my favor at all, because then I came from a single parent family, and then also on top of that my mom was suffering from a long-term mental illness, which meant that she was in and out of psychiatric care. So our childhood was very scattered, and our home life was kind of, we were put here and there and everywhere. So there were just so many things that were set up for me to not have for it to not end well for me at all. And if anything, if I was kind of following the trajectory of my peers at that point in time, if I'm talking about my mid to late teens, then the thing for me to do would have be very quickly have a child by somebody who I was not necessarily interested in. Because a lot of the girls that I grew up with, it was the way that they kind of set the system up was that if you had a child, then you got an apartment. It was like you kind of it kind of like was put in your head that way, that and you could see people do that. They had a child and then suddenly they had money and they had a home, and then it looked like at least they got out of their parental home and they had a level of independence. But I could see how difficult it was. I mean, growing up as a daughter from a single parent family, I knew that single parenthood was no joke whatsoever. So whatever it looks like, and you might have the keys to your own front door, the reality of that on a real level from the parents' point of view and from the child's point of view, for the most part, and I'm not saying that's like a blanket statement, because I know a lot of people do really well, but many of the women around me, because they were so young, well, they were girls, didn't really have that direction and fortitude, and also prior to that, I was just really into music. I always loved creativity. I loved writing. I loved listening to the top 40 every week. And I just got obsessed with wanting to be able to write songs and perform. And so I really kind of bought into the idea that that was something that was possible for me. So my mind was super focused on that being the way that my life was going to go. I was going to leave Wolverhampton, which is a very tiny town, move to London and make the big time. And so there were always things that I wanted to do, and I was very much focused on that. And even prior to really getting embedded in music, I was really into sports. And sports and music were things that just came super naturally to me. I didn't realize how difficult it was for everybody else. And that's not to say I didn't work hard, but I kind of had a leg up because I had a natural talent and then a drive to kind of make either of these things happen for myself. So from an early age, I just wanted to get away. I'd read a few biographies of people who were like in the careers that I wanted. So I saw a lot of the time that their lives didn't start with them just turning up on TV with sequins and Oscars and Grammys falling out of their hands. There was usually a very humble beginning. And I was like, well, if they had a humble beginning, why can't I have a humble beginning? And I just wanted something different for myself as well, from my surroundings, because nobody seemed to be looking forward to life. It was like, they say we should do this, should we do that? But I could never get that question answered of, well, who are these they that are directing your lives and telling you that this is what you're supposed to do? So I never bought into the narrative of that was what I wanted to do. I always had a different idea. I didn't know how it was going to happen, but that curiosity was enough to at least kind of move me off in like one degree slightly to the right of everyone else, which then as time went on just became a wider gap.
Did you see anybody else doing that?
Not around me, no.
Just in the biographies that you were reading.
Oh, right. Okay. So I'm trying to think of some of the biographies that I read. I think maybe I read like a Dusty Springfield one, maybe Paul McCartney one, like just kind of like real random stories of like people that I didn't even grow up in a household where we played the Beatles, to be honest, or Dusty Springfield, but I knew them as big names, so that it would. And then I happened across their biographies and saw that their stories were working class, and they kind of got themselves through it somehow. So I don't know why my brain put two and two together, because there was no evidence whatsoever, and even less support of me actually going that way. It was just me having this kind of fantastical idea in my mind that one day it would be possible for me. And because the vision was so clear in my mind, I'd like think about it, dream about it practically all the time, that's what kept me moving forward. And looking back now, I realize having such a strong vision for my future actually kept me very secure and safe, considering all of the instability and kind of stuff that was going on around me in my family and extended family, that had I have not had something to aim for that I thought would get me out of it or kind of keep me safe, at least in my own bubble, I probably wouldn't be here, and I would have absorbed the impact more so of what was happening around me. And that's not to say that I didn't, but it just kind of meant that I still had something to go and find solace in my creativity when it all got too much.
Yeah, it's interesting because oftentimes, as you describe, people look outside themselves, right? They
Mhm.
say society says, or my friends say, or my family says to do this, that, or the other with my life. But it sounds like very innately you were looking inward. This vision that you had may have been informed by the outside, but the reality is that it was an internal vision. It was
Yes.
an inner guiding system that said, there's something different.
Mm,
And
mm.
you followed it despite the fact, and you found it to be something that was safe, despite the fact that it had some ambiguity and it didn't necessarily have any clarity with how you were going to follow that path, which many people would describe as risky. Which
Yeah.
leads me to one of the things that we talked about in our previous conversation was risk and how people
Mm.
define risk. And some people could look at your life and the shifts that you made as being a risky decision. How do you describe risk?
Risk is risk is when you kind of like put all your chips on on one color and hope it comes up, and not even knowing whether it's for you or not for you. And I can see from the outside how, there are many steps and things that I've jumped into with no guarantee of anything. But the only guarantee that I had when I was making any of these moves was I was stepping away from what I knew was not right for me. And just going forward didn't mean that I had any certainty that it was going to happen and turn out well. But the bigger risk has always been for me to think that if I just pretend that, it's too big a dream, it's a pipe dream, it's not going to happen for me, that I'll be okay and I'll get to the end of my life and I won't regret it, and I'll, just kind of tread the narrow path and the safe path and be okay. That poses a bigger risk to me than any of those things, because I know in my heart of hearts I'd be miserable, even when I veer off my path for like a couple of months, or something where I just my attention kind of gets diverted for a short period of time. If I don't feel that I'm back or doing or putting something in to moving forward, I start to feel a buildup of like, it's all going to fall to bits. You need to do something. You need to do something towards it. Like even today in like these kind of like entrepreneurial things that we do, like we have to like take time off and go, do you know what? If you take the afternoon off, your entire work is not going to fall down, but because I'm always aware that something needs to be put in. So yeah, the risk to me was to not even try. And to this day would always be to not try.
Right. This kind of reminds me of I actually was introduced to you through Bridget Korn's podcast, Passionate
Mm-hmm.
Pursuits, and I heard that interview and I was wrapped with it. I told you I had like 6, 7 pages in notes because I just really what you were talking about really resonated with me, and what you're describing is this willingness that not everybody has to be radically honest. You talk about
Mm-hmm.
radical honesty and how
Mm.
important that's been in your life. Can you talk a little bit more about the importance of radical honesty and how you see it within yourself as well as in the work that you do?
Sure. I mean, to myself is to really admit when things are going right and when things are not going right, and when I've messed up and when I've not messed up. And although I might never get the opportunity to have like an open conversation with somebody else about that, even just, a discussion to go, oh my God, I messed up, like my life's over, like, even though I've not necessarily always do that, is to be really honest with myself about what I'm doing. And it goes back to that risk as well. Radical honesty with myself is like, you will not be happy. You won't. You won't be happy if you pretend that you didn't want to do music, you didn't want to leave home, you didn't want to do these things, and you just wanted to kind of move into the safer, more favorable and familiar option to everyone else. It would have it would have brought out a side of me that I don't necessarily really like. And that I kind of use that shift in behavior as a gauge now as well, because I can feel myself when I'm in situations where I know that I'm not enjoying where I am, or I'm not being heard, or for one reason or another. And it usually comes down to like employment situations, you know, or like that kind of thing, when I'm doing something solely for the money, because suddenly I've got a mistrust in my own ability to generate, you know, what's needed for me from all of the opportunities that we have presented. And I kind of take a safe step and go into a situation where the people there just don't see me, and simply because they just don't see themselves. It's not even about me being here waving, you know, like yellow and green flags or anything like that. The people that I find that I'm able to be radically honest with are the ones that are able, that have a high level of self-awareness and to be radically honest with themselves, so we can have that backwards and forwards, you know, without anyone feeling that they're being attacked or feeling triggered by what I'm trying to say. I'm just trying to get you to kind of build yourself up to that level of strength that you can face the truth and see that it actually doesn't crush you at all. If anything, it reveals more of yourself and a much stronger version of yourself than be shrouded in deceit and lies. And, you know, just seeing so many people that walk around with deceit and lies, and seem to be comfortable with that. I mean, I don't understand. But one thing I will say is when I work with people, I will keep poking the bear in the most loving of ways, you know, but if I can smell that you're lying to yourself, and if you really say that you want the transformation that you say when you come to me, then this is what's going to happen. You know, like if you want like the soft soap and the you know, the love and light and the fruity lala, then there's lots of other people that will be able to facilitate with you with that, and there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes we just want to move forward with a level of bypassing, but I'm not about that at all. I'm about like expressing yourself in the rawest of ways and being true to yourself and showing the world authenticity and truth. And the only way you can do that is by radical honesty, and sometimes it stings a little bit, but you know, you get over it way quicker than any kind of lie.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you talked about with this radical honesty, one of the things that I think is important is you mentioned, you know, you don't understand how people can operate from this place of, you know, telling themselves, you know, something that isn't true or being deceitful. And
Mm,
oftentimes, as you know, we are not necessarily aware of. In fact, I'm doing my podcast today that I'm launching is on blind spots and
mm,
us and our inability to actually see what's happening in our lives. And so one of the things that I think is important that you talk about is you mentioned that you're a spiritual vessel. And so
mhm,
as a spiritual vessel, then you are activating your voice. And
mhm,
in order to be honest and not tell ourselves lies and to be deceitful, we have to be willing to tap into what our truth is and to be able to
mm.
activate our voice, which it sounds like your music was almost like a way that you like a gateway into being able to use your voice. So can you talk a little bit about voice and how you were able to find that?
Yeah, I mean, like even it took me a while to get to the point where I felt that I'd found my own true voice, like my own transformation. And that was well into I'd say like it was like my 30s, like my mid-30s, when I really found a tutor that would help me with my voice. And prior to that, I'd had different teachers. But also where my voice was placed, there was a lot of tightness. It was kind of placed, not really connected or even resonating that much around my body. So considering that I'd spent so long wanting to, you know, be a singer, my voice really didn't kind of come to its own resonance in terms of me being confident that I could just go and like open my mouth and what comes out is what I come out, what I want to come out. Until I'd really worked on feeling where I was holding back in myself. So I was holding back in my own voice, like it was very light, it wasn't embodied in anything. So it was almost like it was this kind of little light girl's voice that just, you know, it was up here and it didn't really sound or feel like anything. You know, people be like, oh, you've got a really sweet voice, and they still kind of say that now, but my where I speak from and where I communicate from, where I sing from now is a way different place. Because I remember when I started to work with this new tutor, she got me just, what was that song? These Boots Were Made for Walking, you know, Nancy Sinatra song. So she literally for like the first month or so just got me like almost like talkie singing it. She wouldn't, if anything veered into like sounding like a song, she'd pull it back. She just wanted me to get to the point where I was in these boots were made for walking, because there was a catch where it would actually like really lock into my chest resonance. And the moment that I really got it, you know, like it's almost like a thing where it clicks and it goes in, and I was able to like then to be able to do it without it being like accidental, because when you're kind of finding your own, you know, your own beat and your own sensation, you're kind of turning the knobs all the time and trying to find out where your gauge is. And then it would be like, oh, there it is, like how did you get there? And you know, like it took a while to kind of keep going back and finding where it was. And the moment that I found out where it was, I mean, the first few times that I found out where this resonance was, in my voice from where I used to speak before, where it's like kind of up and out and light and not really connected. So that's where it was before, you know, like up here. So I didn't really have any control of it. But when I pulled it down here, I could still do high notes from here, but there was just more. And also, I started to feel the vibration of that move through not only my throat, but into my heart, and really kind of open the vibrations of my heart chakra and all of that. And that was at the time where I didn't really know that much about chakras and stuff like that. I was just kind of learning it. So I didn't really understand the relevance and the importance of vibration around those areas in particular. But then looking back, as I started to learn more about that side of things and then understand how it tied in with vocal production and then true vocal production, so you're coming from your resonance and your true frequency, then it made total sense to me as well. And it was locked in. You know, I wouldn't, you know, you couldn't move me out of it. You can't move me out of it, which is why when I try and remember where I was, I have to literally really think about and pull myself back out of it to go back into that space. And I can feel how by going back into this, I'm part of me is like the rest of me is like empty. It feels like some part of me is vacated, like a energetic part of me has left the building almost. And then when I kind of pull back and like sit back into this area, like I can feel it go through all of me, and I feel very connected to source spirit, but also very, very grounded at the same time.
I think this is such an important discussion, and a point that you're bringing up. I think
Mm.
so many times when people feel disempowered and they don't have a voice,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it is not being in your body, right? It's being very, you
Yes.
described up here in our heads. We're thinking, we're trying, and that's where all the anxiety comes up, right? But once we
Mm-hmm.
get into our bodies, I feel like what sometimes happens for people is they fumble into some solutions that they don't understand why it helps them feel good. For example, I was just thinking about, when I was younger, I was in the choir,
Mm.
and that's not what you're talking about. This very intentional decision to get into voice, where she's developing your skill from a very, a very different place than choir, right? But for
Mm.
me, choir was something that I found it did do something to me in my body, right? I felt this
Mm.
sense of belonging. I felt this reverberation in me, and it was doing something. But what you're describing, I think, is really important for people to hear, that you can very intentionally. We oftentimes think that if we want to get our voice, that we have to just use it. Just use
Mm-hmm.
your voice, and it comes out kind of fumbly, and it doesn't occur like maybe what we would want, or with the control that we want. And what you're describing is a very intentional segue and a
Mm-hmm.
development of a skill that can actually come through utilizing and learning to use your voice, leads to understanding how to communicate and use your voice. It's
Mm.
almost like developing and cultivating that skill.
Yes. Yeah. Because there's so much to it. And which is why I created I created a course out of it, because of that, because of really understanding it. And also once I'd done that, like one of my first, I suppose, official students was a friend of mine when I was out in Bali, and we'd always go out. And I was there for a few months as well, so I'd kind of checked out of the UK. And I we'd always go out for meals, and she'd just be like, "Oh, I can't sing, I can't sing, I can't sing," you know, just like this constant barrage of I can't sing, I don't have a voice. When I was 5 years old, I got told this, like the usual stuff where somebody with their wisdom comes and traumatizes somebody and removes them from their expression. You know, how dare they? But they really do have an impact. So by the time I met with Zoe, you know, it's 35 years later, and we're in Bali, and I would just go like, you can, if you can speak, you can sing. You know, and we'd go backwards and forwards, arguing over it all the time. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it for you. I'm going to teach you. I'm going to show you that you can, you know. And so I, you know, and she lived in this like beautiful place in Bali, so we've got the trees and everything. I wish we'd taken more pictures, to be honest. But I just got her to really feel back into the resonance and the parts where that were kind of like trapped and closed down within her. And initially it was just getting her to hum and just getting the vibration of the hum. And if you, going back to the chakras as well, the hum is like the seed mantra of the throat chakra anyway. So that in itself is going to kind of just really open and kind of just start releasing and opening things within you. And that was what was happened. That's what happened to me when I didn't even realize it was connected to the throat chakra. And then I learned about that, you know, the structure, and I saw how they correlated, because I saw what it did to her and how it awakened her. And it opened her up to the point that it was really emotional, you know, and you know, to this day, and we're still friends, she always goes back to that moment in time and the shift that it made in her, and how she was then able to kind of like resonate out more. Is also, once you feel your own power and the strength of your own voice from yourself, it's not even to go out there and speak to hundreds and thousands, but a lot of the time when you're really trapped in your own fears about communicating, your voice becomes very silent. You know, like you speak with such a tiny voice, and what always used to happen to me is people be like, speak up, you know, which is even more traumatizing when like,
Mm-hmm.
it just kind of sets you back and back and back. So then when I started to really feel what that felt like, then I was able to like allow it to come through more, you know, like I said, vibrate through me. And if you think of your own resonance, your own voice, as when you find your truth, when you've calibrated to what your true voice feels like, and then you're able to speak from that point, not only do you kind of start to like open up and heal within yourself, but then those kind of like those resonant those alternative resonances that kind of align with you, i.e. other people who are speaking for them, for their truth, come, and you form community, or people say you find your tribe or anything like that. It's that sympathetic resonance was the phrase that I was looking for, where you just kind of find that other people like hear you or feel you, or they may not even know what it is about your voice, but they'll just be like, oh, what's, you know, it's just something about them just kind of like ticks something open in them. And for them, then it's up to them to kind of take the opportunity to open within themselves. Not that they'd necessarily come and ask me to, you know, do something, but it will be in the back of their minds of like, what was that, what was so special about being around her that made me feel this way that I may not feel around other people. And it, you know, the more, I think the more of us, especially in the world with all the turmoil and the ups and downs and the turning that's going on now, if more people are able to speak from a place of truth, that will shift the entire vibration of where we're going, or what shifts can be made, or what shifts are being attempted to be made as we move forward. That's why I think it's really important that we all find that within each other. If we want the world to be a better place, we need to start with being truthful and better within ourselves.
Absolutely. That's beautifully said. And speaking of, you know, the circumstances that we find ourselves within the world, obviously if we're using our voice, can you talk a little bit about how once we activate our voice, and you talked about our chakras,
Yeah.
what's that interrelationship with our heart, with our heart chakra, because you can
Mm.
obviously activate your voice and your throat chakra and still not necessarily have a fully activated heart chakra. So if we learn in the world how to speak our truth, I think some of what we're seeing are people are speaking their truth, but they haven't sunk into their heart. So can you talk a
Right.
little bit about how those two can be activated together?
Mm. Yeah, I've the I'm trying to think, the first time that I ever really felt a heart opening was I was listening to a meditation or like a visualization. I was actually walking down the road, so I wasn't even doing it in the way that it should have been done. And it was just on a webinar that was being kind of replayed, and it was about kind of go into your heart and open your heart and visualize your heart and see what it means to have your heart open. And that was the first time I'd ever heard such language. It's like, what is that, what is this? But I went along with it anyway. And again, just like remember walking down the road, and it was quite a built up area, so it wasn't even like I was sitting under a tree or anything like that, to invite it in. But I really felt what it was to kind of open up and feel that openness, that love, that warmth, that kind of like all the good stuff, all the gooey stuff, and all the things as well and the areas that I had kind of closed off to protect myself, because there's that fine line between protection and then seclusion. Especially the longer that you feel that you have to protect yourself, then you get to a point where you've really shut yourself down and shut yourself off. So it was just feeling into that, and for me it was just kind of thinking about uh feeling a warmth in that area, feeling what would that feel like, and allowing the visualization of just like the idea of kind of just moving an energy down there as well. And like I said, I wasn't even doing it right, as in I wasn't kind of sitting in a calm place. I was walking down the road, but I was kind of just like focusing on what they were doing, and even in that built up area I felt something move and something shift. um and I think if we think about the way to kind of just like very easily feel what your heart resonance feels like for you is to draw to mind things that make you feel good. And it can be anything from, your favorite drink, your favorite pet, something that just brings you the most amount of joy, and just sit with that and see how that feels in your body. And just allow that feeling. Like, how big can you make that feeling? Can you allow that feeling to not just be in your heart center, but then to be something that kind of moves through your body and then becomes something that encompasses you, and then you're able to shine that out. And then once you kind of open that area, and like you say, if you're in your head all the time, you're not allowing that resonance, that energy to move it from your heart. And I've heard it said, and I didn't come up with this, so I can't take credit for it, but I really loved it, was that if you have a blockage in your throat chakra, if you think about where your heart is, and if you're managing to really open up the space in your heart, you can't get past here. It's almost like a chimney blocked, that center is blocking your heart, that truth of your heart expression. So the minute that you're able to really open up the throat chakra and that energy center, then now everything that's coming out through you is going through the throat chakra, and then it's like it's more heart-centered communication, heart-centered words, which will override the kind of the monkey mind going round and over analyzing things and trying to work out if things are right or not, because the power of your heart will supersede over whether you think whether anyone's going to like it or not, because it's coming from a good place. It feels good, it's love, and if that's coming out, then the mind chatter just kind of pulls back. It, like, there's no space, there's no room for it. And if ever it comes, it's like it doesn't matter, because the people that hear it and feel it, and the people that do not, and you'll come across them, will be, because they're overwhelmed by what they're being presented to, because it almost mirrors where they're not. And it's then showing them that there's a possibility for them, or it's giving them a choice. Some people take the choice, some people fight against the choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of reminds me like what you're describing when you talk about, getting into our heart, and that's
Mm,
where the love is, and that's where also where desire is. So this when we're open about our authentic life and what we want our life to look like, and we have this vision,
yeah.
it to some people would describe it as risky because there's so much emotion in there. But there's also
Mm,
that emotion because when we get on our heartstring, there's a long cord that goes all the way back to childhood and goes to so many different memories. And there's such vast opportunities for it to get murky in there.
mhm.
So how do you, or do you, when you're working with somebody who tends to pull away, right? I could see that. I see that in my own practice where it can touch on something that's really scary for people, and
Mm,
lots of reasons why they can't go forward come up, right? So
yeah.
what, if anything, how do you approach that with people in anticipation that probably something will like that happen? And how do you encourage people or support people through still maintaining getting through that murkiness?
Yeah. I think when that when that murkiness comes up, and it comes up for all of us, I'm not perfect. I'm still moving forward. I'm still transforming myself. And those moments come up, but I allow myself to kind of, move through them quickly. And also because I can see that I'm cataloging my life and my experiences and the way that I'm transforming myself. All the work that I do now is simply from my own experience, and with added trainings, but like it's because I've managed to work through things. And when I find that I'm kind of getting kind of caught or stuck in certain situations, and if I think of kind of recent examples where I've got kind of trapped in maybe like being overly hurt or overly concerned or overly trying to get somebody to see me, and you'd think that I'd be over that by now. But there are still, certain relationships that I wanted to maintain because I felt that there was value in them. I thought there was value in them. um, is then getting to the point of realizing that if I want to move forward, this has to go. It has to go. And that's a hard thing as well, especially, when I was younger and I had these dreams. I thought that everyone that was my friend when I was 16 were going to live on the yachts and the mansions with me when I was rich and famous as a pop star, but life doesn't go like that, because as you move forward and you become more, certain people just step off at certain points. They just can't go any further because they don't see to go further. They don't want to go further. They don't want to take the risk. So when you get caught in those things that are then kind of challenging to you, it's to then remind yourself what you're on the journey for, and what it's going to take for you to move forward, and what that situation is really showing you. It might just be showing you that you've come to the end of the road now with somebody. It's for what it was showing me, it was I was I was kind of falling back into a level of people pleasing in order to just have someone come along with me. And it wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to work, because the only way that I was going to be able to maintain that relationship and that collaboration was then to start denying areas of myself that were I was expanding into, and I could feel that I was moving forward and expanding. And that's where the tension started to happen in this relationship, where they were like, oh, that's no, and they probably don't even realize they were doing it because it was so subtle. It was just coming out of the side of their mouths. They probably didn't even know, to be fair to them. um and and also to notice when I'd kind of feel the twinge of it, like something would be said, and it'd be like you'd feel that, like hurt you. You'd be surprised, because it's, especially with someone that you've had like a deep working relationship with or collaboration with for a long time, and you've created some really good stuff. And then it's getting to the point that, okay, I'm kind of here now, and I'm feeling all of these things, and also I'm recognizing, oh, we're going back into that people pleaser, that yes person that's hiding, pushing like the best parts of myself back into the shadows again. After all the work that I've done, am I really going to do this? And it's just reminding myself of the vision, and reminding myself that I've gotten over things over and over again. And as I've moved forward, the people that have been with me the longest in terms of like long-term friendships, of which there are a few, get deeper and richer. those, and then the ones that, you know, the people that you have to kind of just say, this is where we part, you know, lovingly, this is where we part, because this is the vision that I've had for my life since I was a child. I can't just stop now to maintain this toxicity or this trap that I'm in. So it's always to remind you, and we all get trapped, and it's usually because we've got external things and we're making comparisons. Is remind yourself why you started out in the first place. You know, these that you might meet again down the road, but remember it's you, why you started out in this in the first place, who it's going to make of you. And for me, I think the thing that keeps me going is the curiosity of seeing, like, who can I possibly be, despite, you know, the humble beginnings that I had. Like, how does this story end, and what can I make of my life? And the curiosity of that will eventually come back and override any stuck bits that I come across.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Like, you know, you describe that tension, right, between uh where you are and where you want to be, right? You know, like something comes up. And when we spoke before, I remember it was an interesting term. You said I was wallowing in some of my emotions, right? And I can identify with that. There's seasons to wallowing. And I think that's really important for people to understand. There's some value in that wallowing, but
Mm,
at some point you mentioned that it keeps you, you recognized it keeps you from your beauty, and it
yeah.
keeps you from beauty. I heard you say, when you said beauty, I was thinking who you could be, like who
Mm,
you were stretching on being. And so I think it's really valuable and important to for people to know that nobody that goes through this journey is not having seasons of wallowing. There are
right.
moments where we have that season, but then it sounds like what's instinctual for you is to evaluate it, to pluck the lessons, and then to determine, how do I keep going forward on my path in health?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. And also part of that comes from now realizing that I have to repeatedly do that anyway. But I had examples ahead of me in the matriarchal line of my family of women who didn't make that choice. They didn't make the choice to move past the things that had happened, very real, traumatic, sad, heartbreaking, unfair things that happened. Um, uh, but they couldn't move past them. There was always some thread, there was always some level of retribution, revenge, you know, like all the things that start to get heavier and heavier. And if you don't allow something to kind of remain in its place and kind of free yourself from its attachment to you, even if you continue to move forward and age through life, you know, have another year, another decade or so, if you're still attached to the story of that thing, then it's going to snap you back at any point. And I would see when they would talk about events that had happened to them 10, 20, 30, 40 years previous, they'd instantly be there. Their physiology would change, their the temper would be there, the emotion, and they were living that there and then over and over again. And as it said, like, your subconscious doesn't realize that a real or a lived event. So if you're continuously traumatizing yourself by the lived experience of that thing, then you're just causing yourself more and more pain. So I was very much aware that I could only ever give myself, you know, a prescribed amount of time to wallow, and then be like, no, because I've seen the damage that will do to you if you stay in that place. You know, that how it will impact you spiritually, mentally, physically, your health. And then on top of that, with that heaviness that you hold, it then kind of peters out to everyone around you in your family, because ultimately when you get to a point where you're broken spiritually, mentally and physically, you then become a ward of care for the extended family. And that in itself is a burden that I personally didn't want to impose on other people, because I felt the weight of that myself, and I didn't have a choice. And I know most people don't have a choice. And it's a really difficult thing to talk about, is the responsibility that a carer takes on, but also what it really feels like. Because, you know, even though you're caring for people that you love and care for, sometimes you don't want to do it. Sometimes you just want the freedom. Sometimes you're angry. Sometimes you're of all the things, and it's hard to vocalize that, because then, you know, I remember like someone who I was friends with a while back, when I'd say, you know, I get frustrated that I can't have the relationship I want to have with my mom, because, you know, this recurring mental illness, and I'm not being able to kind of communicate her with in a way. And I was trying to like share what was on my heart, and then what comes back is like, yeah, but it's your mom, she's ill, you know. So like, even though what she said was true, but my experience was true, and it was like, so the way it traps you in that you can't then even be honest about how you feel about a situation. I didn't say I hated her. I didn't say I didn't want her to be alive. I just said, this is how I feel at this moment, but it was invalid. I was not allowed to say that. So it's also, I think, we go back to radical honesty, is being able to say the hard things, the things that people say, oh, you can't say that. I'm like, but it's a true expression of where I'm at right now. And maybe people don't want to hear that when you're in a situation and you're having to care for someone, it's an emotional, spiritual, physical, financial, everything burden on you that will kind of limit what you can do with your life at that point in time. And I think it's only fair that anyone who is dealing with that is allowed to like say how they feel about that.
Yeah, what you're describing is what I call we live in this culture of silence, where we're
Mm,
just supposed to be quiet about it and just handle it like it's always been handled, because it makes everybody around us comfortable, because it's the right thing to do. And so anytime there's a voice that goes against the norm or what's expected, then it's kind of pushed against, right? Because it makes everybody uncomfortable. So when I hear you talking about this, I'm thinking about, like, we all have families and we all have different relationships with families.
mm,
How is it that you approach, like, when you have this long-standing cord of a story being told by somebody so important like your mother in your life? There's the spoken story. It's the
right.
retelling of the story when you're around them that then has an impact on you. But then there's also those times that you go into that environment that the story isn't being spoken, but you feel the story. And
Mm.
so then it's even almost like harder, because you feel the emotion, you feel the resonance, but there's no words to substantiate what you're feeling. So how do you approach? I think people can identify with the spoken version and the unspoken version in the emotions that happen when you re-enter family. How do you approach family when there are these scripts and you're trying to maintain your health and your purpose and direction in life?
In my instance, in order for me to have moved on with my life and to be able to have the life that I wanted to have, I had to make the decision to leave. I had to make the decision to separate and to actually find my life and expand into the life that I needed to live, to express myself in the way that I wanted to. And it was not even just about, you know, me kind of doing all of these meditations and spiritual healing. It's just everything was kind of up for ridicule, you know, because I was living my life in such a different way. And you know, the fact that I was vegetarian was a problem. The fact that I lived in London, they lived in there, like everything started to get kind of like pulled on and put on, because there was some unspoken thing that no one was directly coming out and saying what it was. So and because I saw that that was happening, you know, it got to the point where I'm like, if I don't step away now, then in order to kind of maintain this culture and be part of the culture of the family, the cult ideology of the family unit, and everyone has one, just kind of looks different, you know, whatever yours is like. Um, I was going to have to pretend that none of the things that I'd spent so much time focused on and trying to achieve were important, and that's what you know, that's where I wanted to do. Like I just, everything about me was always being ridiculed and stripped down in public, you know, and the majority like really had a really took kind of pleasure in it. I know a smile when that when you're in a situation and you see the smiles and the sniggers and the crossed eyes and the kind of the tap of the elbow or the head or anything like that, you just get an idea that these people just think I'm a joke. And things like you talk about my podcast. I remember my podcast being ridiculed. Like, why are you doing that? You're not making any money of it. Like, who comes on that? Who's listening to it? Just like literal pull down of everything that I stood for. And then what was interesting, then every now and again I just get like a little DM or an email from someone that said, oh, I really like that episode that you did, or just like one little thread of what I'm doing, what I heard, what you said, and I contacted the person that was on there, and I'm going to work with her. And I'm just like, how I can't keep playing the two. It's impossible. Everything that came through about my music, any creative endeavor, the podcast came and it was given to me in such a beautiful way, that the risk, it was just kind of like, this is what you've got to do next, this is what you've got to do now, follow this through, create that, meet these people. So it was so different from the way that everyone else was living their life. Of course it made no sense. They're like, so pig-headed, you're so like pie in the sky, head in the clouds, you're impractical, you're unreasonable. I'm like, I am, because I've got to be, because if I look at the way that the world is now and what's being presented to me, this reality stinks for me. It makes me deeply unhappy. So I have to follow my delusions, because all of the deluded people are the ones that have created innovation in the world. So I want to be part of these crazy folk. And just with making that decision, that it wasn't an easy decision to make, because I knew that I was walking away from everything. But was I really? Because in walking away from being in that environment where I knew that nobody took me seriously, they thought I was a joke. Like, who wants to be around that? And I remember the day that I left, because I was actually staying at family members, and I came back to London with just like everything that I had. And I was staying at another friend who kind of like found me somewhere. She was away. She's like, look after my place for a few weeks while you sort yourself out. And I remember getting on a tube station and and I ended up sitting next to a woman that initially we were looking at someone else's baby, and then we started talking to each other. And she ended up being on my podcast because she was just such a fascinating woman. And it was me, just like it was just a real kind of like flag of divine knowing that you've made this decision, and look, you can just get on a train and sit next to someone who's right for you, who understands your mission and what you're about, a complete stranger. And that just kept me going. So in my instance, in order for me to kind of be and go to where I needed to go, I had to make the decision to separate, because it wasn't feeding me. I wasn't being seen. And it's not to say that there aren't moments where you're just like, man, that's a cold pill to take. It's a big thing to do, to separate yourself and to feel that isolation. But then what's a bigger isolation, me being physically on my own, or me being spiritually on my own, surrounded by a room full of people who think I'm a joke? So it's not an easy thing. And I know I'm not the only person who's had to make big decisions to draw a line and say no more, because I can only grow if I go in that direction and leave everything behind me. So I've had to make some really big strides over the course of, that's why I can't give up now, because it's cost me so much already.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've gained so much also by taking that courageous step. I mean, so many times I think because it's the box we know, we stay in this little confined box of expectations that everybody has of us, and we keep that identity. And I was just talking to somebody the other day, and I was describing how we're little bodies and we grow into bigger bodies. We have little minds and we grow into bigger minds, but we don't expect our souls to grow, right? We expect
Right.
to stay in this confined space, but yet all of us continues to grow. And it's so hard though. Like you said, a tough pill to swallow when the people that you love and care about don't accept us. And we have to make a decision for our health and for our well-being to follow this other direction. But I love, it's beautiful when you describe how you get this divine knowing that
Mm.
when once you gain your voice and once you become able to be embodied, You
Mhm,
know
mhm.
what right feels like. You
Yeah.
know what your truth feels like. So when something that is in, just like the non-spoken tension between the family is invisible, this rightness between the universe that's invisible, we know right from wrong.
Yeah.
We know right from wrong. It feels different. And I think it's beautiful that you're willing to follow spirit and willing to
Mm.
follow these universal this universal guidance that's trying to direct you towards your highest joy in your life,
Mm.
towards
Mm.
your path versus the known path that I think is so easy for people to take because we know where it leads.
Yeah, but who out of those people who do that are truly, truly happy, you know? And I feel when someone tells me that they're happy. I'm like, are you? You know, like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, but it's not so much like your words, it's like everything else that comes. Is like maybe you can fool yourself and maybe you can tell me something, but when you're talking to me, I'm not even really listening to you audibly. I'm kind of like, you know, feeling around or like, yeah, is that where you're coming from? And also your actions and the way that you live your life on a day-to-day basis, how you do everything is how you do all of the things. It will just kind of expand and it will express itself anyway within that. And it depends if you feel it's important. It depends how important you feel your life is. It depends how grateful you are for your life. So few people are not really, or maybe they just don't realize that they're alive. You know, it might just be that it's like you're living and you're going to die one day. It's like, are you okay with this being it? I mean, if you are, then good. I'm like, lucky. Lucky you, because you know, I would have saved myself such an enormous amount of stress if I was just pleased with what I could have had. I just always wanted something better for myself and bigger for myself, and it didn't even have to align with what anyone else feels is bigger or better, because like materially and, you know, checking the boxes of all the things that I should have in a worldly sense, I don't have half of those things. So it's most definitely not about stuff. So, you know, it's about something else that you can't quantify unless you feel it, and then, you know, magic happens after that way.
Yeah. So as we kind of get to a place of wrapping up, I'd like to end with, you said something last time, a quote that really resonated with me. You said, um, "Everything feels on purpose now."
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about what that sense of purpose means to you, and what's that kind of guiding light that you have in your life, and how you feel that?
Um, it's just thinking about, I think also because I'm kind of doing a bit of a like life review as I'm trying to like put a book together, and I realized that all of the things that I've been through, all of the experiences that I've been through, even, you know, the crappy waitress job that I thought like amounted to nothing, you know, like all of these different things taught me something, put me in line with someone, gave me a skill, like gave me like a bit of trivia or something. I can see how all of these little bits of things that happened in my life have led up to this point now, where now that I'm putting it together and putting it out there, I'm attracting and having conversations with people who get it. You
Mhm.
know, like, and when you've spent a lifetime of being misunderstood, you're just like, why do I keep doing this? Because like no one seems to get it. You know, I seem to like have to over explain myself just to be heard. And even then, once I've spent so much energy trying to convince somebody else of all I'm about and who I am and what I'm doing, they still don't get it. But then now when I'm, you know, appearing on podcasts like yours and Bridget's and others, I'm just able to say what I say. And like some people are like, yeah, actually, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. So, you know, so I feel from like, you know, I had to just do like the first 50 years of like life school before it started to really kind of pop up into something else. And that's why I say I feel that it's on purpose now, because I can see all of the reasons why everything happened. And even the you know, the frustrating bits are, you know, I there was a song who's we talked about this, someone, I was doing it with somebody else, we were talking about life on purpose, and it was a song that was Aretha Franklin and George Michael, that I knew you were waiting for me. And there's a line in that where it says, when I think of all my disappointments, I just laugh. And that's how I kind of feel of like when I think of like all of these major like efforts that I thought were the end of things, even when I lost everything time and time again and had to go and beg somebody to help me out, or or apologize, or and all of those things, is like, here I am. It didn't take me out, it took me down for a bit, and I wallowed for a bit, but now I can laugh at it. And now the new part of me is now allowing myself to move into a period of expanding and not expecting the other shoe to drop. So this is a new space for me to go like, okay, we've done the lessons now we're on the point of expressing it and allowing things to be good and allowing people to understand you, and then not being any kind of, there's always going to be things happening, but it just be on a different plane. So that's what I mean by all of those things when I say all of that.
Oh, and allowing things to be good. Oh, like
Mm,
how often is that also a hard pill to swallow, that if we're not used
yeah,
to things being good, it can be really uncomfortable. That allowing is
yeah,
so, I think, wise and not as easy as it sounds.
not at all. This is like a totally new space for me,
Yeah.
allowing things to be good, allowing myself to be heard, allowing myself to be happy, and have feel like I've arrived at the point where, okay, now we get on with stuff, because this is just the beginning. So it's not even like I'm here and it's done. It's like, okay, this is a new thing. It can only get better from here. And even when life throws its curveballs, like we've got enough under our belt to be able to kind of move on out of it. So yeah, this is my period of allowing things to be good.
Oh, I love it. You're only halfway through your life, and
Exactly.
and you say it's just the beginning. I think that gives
Hmm.
people a tremendous amount of hope, and I'm so glad that you're using your voice, and I love how you're sharing your gifts with the world. I love that you're sharing your experiences. I know that you're impacting people in a positive way, and I'm sure that the people that are listening are going to hear something that resonates with them, and that kind of gives them some expansion in what's possible, and some hope
Mm.
in their lives. So, thank you so much for being on here today.
Thank you, Beth. I really appreciate the opportunity to just be me. Thank you.
Yeah. And so if people want to, I mentioned at the beginning, but I'd like for you to be able to share, if people were interested in your offerings and how to get a hold of you, can you guide people of how to do that?
Sure. The best place is to go to my website, because that's kind of the hub of everything. So it's carolmaewhittick.com, CarolMaewhittick.com. And yeah, you'll see all that I'm up to, links out to the podcast and the coaching and the courses and all the other bits of stuff that I'm stirring in the pot as well that come up every now and again.
Excellent, great. And I thank you again for being here.
Sure.
And I also want to give a special thanks to Micah Mackenzie, who is the amazing Asheville artist who did the cover art, the portal picture. I always want to give Micah a shout out because of the amazing work that he does. And if anybody's interested in my offerings, I've got Authentically You coming out September 6th. It's a 6-week workshop. You can go to my website, www.bethwar.com. And any questions, obviously reach out to me by email. So thank you again, Carol. And just thank you so much, everybody, for being here. And until next time, peace, love, and light.